Hello again, and welcome back to Greg and Don's Excellent Adventure. This is our funny title for a regular sales conversation, and I don't know why we actually started calling it that, but anyway, it's Greg and Don's Excellent Adventure, and we have a sales conversation about different topics. And today's topic is going to be rather important, I think, because we're going to talk about consistency and habit building. And both of those things are pretty critical to the way that we do things. So I'd like to introduce to you my friend on this call, Greg DeMarco. And
Hello.
Greg, just say hello and brief thing about what you want to say.
Thanks, Don. Greg DeMarco here. Yeah, I basically help people get to the next step in their lives, and I do a lot of mentoring on sales and mindset training. And yeah, I've had about 40 years experience of sales and business development over the years. I've been involved in yachts, selling boats, online courses. You know what, Don? I can't remember all the things that I've done when it comes to selling like vacuum cleaners and luggage and everything else. So I think I've got a few notches on the belt there with a few deals that I've been able to muster up in my life. So there
One,
you go.
one of these days, I think we should just have a conversation about our experiences selling vacuum cleaners, because
Yeah.
I sold vacuum cleaners for a while as well. So
Yeah.
that could be a fun talk. Anyway,
Oh yeah.
yeah, my name is Don Gertz, and my background is in real estate. I've been doing real estate since 1984, and now I'm helping new realtors transition into the business and to establish themselves right away. So, how important is consistency and habit building to a business, to a salesperson? Let's talk specifically to a salesperson.
Yeah. Listen, I think that I did a YouTube video on consistency about a year ago when I was here in Calgary. And one of the things, you know how salespeople have a tendency to have these dips and valleys, these valleys in their career. I remember going through when I was in the boat business, and one month you just be killing it, and then the next month you're like, what the heck happened? Well, a lot of that stems from, and what a lot of people don't recognize, a lot of salespeople don't recognize this, is that it stems from consistency in your sales process. So when you figure out a process that works for you, and you talk about this in your real estate stuff, where you're trying to get people to build their real estate business. Well, one of the main things is consistency, being consistent with what's working in your processes. So, i.e., if you are prospecting certain people in a certain way, what's working best for you? And then repeating that each and every day. And when you do that, you start living in the moment and focusing on what it is you're trying to accomplish. Those little dips and valleys that you get where you're starving one month and then you're eating very well the next month and hot dogs the next and back and forth. It's because of that consistency that you're doing in your sales process to get people to come to you in helping them find what it is they're looking for. And that consistency is extremely important.
Yeah, I 100% agree that you have to be consistent. I think primarily in the idea of your prospecting and developing new leads all the time, or not necessarily new leads, but in your prospecting, looking for referrals. But you're always trying to generate more business. So if you're consistent in generating more business every day, then the rest of it's kind of gonna take its course. Because you mentioned the sales process, but basically, the sales process starts with the introduction to the person or the prospecting, and then it goes down to where you start developing your relationship. You make your presentation. You go for the you make an agreement to enter into an arrangement with them, where you're doing business with them. So that whole process is something to talk about as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, consistency is knowing that what you're going to be doing consistently is going to get the results, because you can be consistent and not get any results. and then that's just being stupid.
Yeah, well, you can be consistent in a lot of things, but I'm talking about the positive side of it. Yeah, you can sit there and be consistent in what's not working and continue to do that, and next thing you know, you're starving to death. But
Yeah.
and it's habits. It's like what you say with consistency and creating habits, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be in the right. You have to be in the listen when it comes down to this mindset stuff with habit forming and consistency and persistence and all that kind of stuff. It all comes down to being in a level of awareness where you're ready to take the steps. At least you recognize that you want to do better. And when you do that, you start to form habits that make sense. And you have to be consistent with
Yeah. Um, I've heard it said that people often they overestimate what they can accomplish in a day, and they underestimate what can be accomplished in 10 months. So we think that like it takes that consistently taking one step at a time, to get towards our objective. I like what John Maxwell he talks about. If you had a tree in your yard and you went out every day, just one and took one swing with your axe, one day, one swing every day, what's going to happen to that tree eventually?
it. Yeah.
It's going to fall down,
Yeah.
but it's the consistently of doing it every day, one thing, that same thing, day after day after day, you're going to get the result that you want. And but that you have to be using the right tools. You have to be doing the right things that are going to get you the results. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but you have to be just consistently doing it all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's like, it's a really good topic of conversation because I think a lot of new salespeople, especially, they're gung ho, which is a great thing. You got to play on that. And they want to get things done. But sometimes they're anxious, too anxious, and don't want to take the time to figure it out. And I can understand that. But consistency really does rule. Well, it rules what you can get accomplished in a day. And the habit of forming proper habits to do that makes a huge difference in your results at the end of the day.
Yeah. So developing habits. One of the things that we do with our new realtors is we want them to get into the idea that every day you need to be doing the same kind of activity. You need to be doing the same kinds of things. So we've outlined or highlighted different activities, like
Mm-hmm.
probably about 10 or 20 different activities that they could do.
Yeah.
Um, Whatever, some of them it's door knocking, some of it's making cold calls, some of it's calling your past clients, some of it's calling, your relatives. You can't call your mother every day and ask her for business, so you have to go someplace else. You have to go someplace else for business, right? So it's important to know that that what you're doing is every day, and then track it. And then I think the really successful realtors, they know how many calls they have to make before they get a referral. They know how many referrals they have to make a presentation to before they get a transaction. They know how many transactions, listings or whatever. They know how many transactions they have to get before they get one that closes. So it's all a matter of numbers, and knowing the numbers. And when you develop the habits, when you form the habits that will work through those numbers, you're going to be successful. I mean, but the trick is that to me, I think the trick is that you have to figure out what's your style. What do you like to do? Not everybody likes to make phone calls. I don't know. Actually, I don't know very many people that like to make phone calls, like cold calls, but there are some, some people like to do that. Other people like to have, hold networking events for their clients, and
Yeah.
they build their relationships that way. So but know what it is that gets you the results, and know what it is that you like to do. Because I mean, maybe it's just me, but if I don't like to do something, it's going to be hard to get me to do it. How about you?
No, no, I get, listen, I tell a lot of my clients when I'm mentoring them in sales is to stick to your skill set. Know what your skill set, which is it comes to the discussion that you and I have about personality types, right? If you understand what your motivations are, like if you're not good at making cold calls, don't do it. There's other tools available or resources available to you that would probably work better for you. And then there's some people that we know that just love that stuff. So try and stick to your skill set when it comes to what are you really good at.
Yeah.
So if you're good at you know doing a networking event, inviting people, then stick to that. If you're good at making cold calls, then have at it.
We have we have one realtor. He's been in the business longer than I have. He started. I think he's been over 40 years in the business.
He must be 100 years old.
No, he's actually younger than me. So he's just a young guy. But he comes in the morning, gets to the office before anybody else. He pulls out his book and he starts calling people. And he calls people from probably about 8:30 to 11 o'clock. And then he goes home. And he consistently is on the Medallion Club, which is the way they rate realtors. It's basically the top 10% of all realtors. So he's consistently in the top 10% of all realtors, and he's done that for 40 years. So he obviously likes it. We would get calls from people saying, "Don't have that guy call me again," because he was so consistent. So you got to be careful when you're doing the cold calling, because there is such a thing in Canada as the do not call list. So you have to make sure that you adhere to those different rules, which kind of complicates things. But there was another young fella. He's pretty brand new in the business, and somebody told him that he needed to go out and knock on doors, and he was getting discouraged because he'd come in and he'd talk and he'd say, I'm not meeting anybody. I'm not getting any traction. So he's getting really discouraged. And so we asked him, we said, "Do you like knocking on doors?" "No, I hate it." "Well, why are you doing it then?" Like you're way further ahead to make the phone calls, because he had a supply of leads that he could follow up on. So he started making more phone calls, and his business has picked up dramatically since he started doing something that he liked to do.
Well, that just proves it right there. I mean, I think what happens too sometimes, Don, is people come into it think they hear a suggestion from somebody, and they think that's what they have to do, instead of thinking that, okay, well, that's one suggestion. What other options do I have available to me? And that's really important, because if you don't, like you just said, that guy, he hated doing door knocking. So stick to something. That's what it comes down to is know what your skills are, what you like to do and what you don't like to do.
Yeah.
And stick to it.
And then do it consistently. And the way that you build the habit is you have to track it. You have to track it. So you make one call, you check. Make another call, it's another check. Another call, it's another check. So just consistently, just taking that each step, because you're not going to go from here to the other side of the room in one big step. You're going to have to make several smaller steps in between. So when you figure out what those smaller steps are for you, and then make those decisions to do them all the time, every day, you're going to get the results eventually.
Yeah, I agree completely. That's a good point. You do have to track it, and it has to be measurable. Otherwise, you don't know what's working and what doesn't.
Yep. Well, Greg, thanks for your thoughts on being consistent and developing good habits. Do you have anything else you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, listen, I think that sales can be a lot of fun if you allow it to, instead of thinking that it's a burden on people. It's not. I think it can be a lot of fun if you enter into it with the right frame of mind and you're consistent. Because hey, listen, there's nothing better than enjoying what you're doing. Helps for things to move along a lot quicker and a lot better than when you hate doing what you're doing, right? So stick to what you like to do and do it.
Yeah, there's too many people in the world that dislike what they're doing. So
yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening to this episode of Don and Greg's, or Greg and Don's. It's Greg and Don's Excellent Adventure, and it always has been that. It's we like to talk about sales and different things to try to help people out. So look forward to our next conversation. and take care.
Thanks very much.